Okay, we're ready. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being so numerous at our masterclass on Asti Spumante and Moscato d'Asti, the wines from the first winemaking district in Italy to receive the UNESCO recognition. Okay, so we'll not just be talking about Asti Spumante, but also of all the other styles of wine made from Moscato grapes. I will also illustrate the drier versions, but a lot of our attention will be focused onto our Moscato d'Asti and on the recent productions of the companies represented here. We need to get started because we have lots of wines for tasting. Okay, just some technical information, especially for our friends from outside Italy. This is the area of production of Asti. Asti DOCG is a single designation with different styles represented. Spumante with Asti, and then the semi-sparkling version with Moscato d'Asti. The production area lies south of the city of Asti, and it encompasses
Sono 51 comuni interessati alla zona di
Alessandria and Asti. 51 municipalities are in the area of production of Asti DOCG, approximately 10,000 hectares in total of production of Moscato grapes. And they account for approximately 90 million bottles produced in total between Asti and Moscato d'Asti. The consortium was founded in 1932 with the mission to protect and promote the Asti wines. And long before the recognition of its DOC status in 1967, and then later on it became a DOCG, Controlled and Guaranteed Designation of Origin. The consortium has a lab that carries out certifications and analysis, also with respect to the production rulebook, so that the consumers are reassured about the fact that there is full compliance with the standards for the production of our wines. As I said, there is just below 10,000 hectares planted with Moscato Bianco to make Asti and Moscato d'Asti. The slide says over 80 million bottles per year. Actually, for 2021, we expect to produce 100 million bottles, subdivided as follows: 55 million for Asti Spumante, the remaining 45 million Moscato d'Asti. The key markets, the main markets, are rather different between the two styles. Moscato d'Asti is a wine, and Asti too are often exported based on our export data. For the Moscato d'Asti style, we have the United States of America that absorbs close to 90% of, well, actually 80% of the production of Moscato d'Asti. Then comes Italy and Korea, and then Russia, Germany, and Great Britain. Italy and the United States are the main markets for Asti Spumante. Now, as I said, the area is pretty large. We have areas that are closer to the mountains to the west, and then areas that are less rocky, such as the area of Alessandria, in the province of Alessandria. And so the soil and the skyline have a big influence on the growth of Moscato Bianco vines and grapes. It's a grape variety that has been documented ever since the early 16th century, and it is a variety that in its transformation from grape to wine preserves most of its aromatic compounds that are typically developed in the area of Asti, where it finds its best terroir. Some descriptors. We have a variety of descriptors. We can go from wisteria, elderberry, linden, all the way to profiles that are closer to fruits, such as lemon zest, lemons, nectarines, white peaches, or tropical fruit, even such as passion fruit, lychees, pineapple, which will integrate the Moscato bouquet in an exceptional fashion. Now, from an olfactory standpoint, these are the descriptors that crop up most commonly, but they are also reflected in the taste. Now, considering the large number of glasses we have in front of us, I would like to ask the people in charge to start pouring the wine for us. Now, as I mentioned, the production of wine styles has recently enlarged to accommodate drier versions. Generally, Asti Spumante, in the sweet version, you have 100 or 90 to 100 grams of sugar per liter. In the case of Asti Dry or Asti Secco, the sugar content is much lower, around 20 grams per liter. These wines are, however, richer in alcohol because, as you know, Asti Spumante is not characterized, just like Moscato d'Asti, is not characterized by a big alcohol content. In Asti Spumante Dolce, you are around 7 to 7.5% alcohol by volume, while for Moscato d'Asti, you're around 5.5% alcohol by volume, as the slide mentions. So here is the sweet version. The residual sugar is higher in this case compared to the dry version, and the alcohol levels is again pretty limited, 6 to 7%. Moscato d'Asti is a style that did not develop when Asti Spumante developed. It developed only in the 1950s when many growers experimented with Moscato grapes, not fermenting them above 5.5% alcohol, which would leave a much richer sugar content in the wine. Now, Asti Spumante is the most historical spumante in Italy. Asti, and especially the town of Canelli, was the place where the first metodo classico was experimented in Italy. It was 1965 when Carlo Gancia, back from some professional experience in France, had taken to Canelli the metodo classico to produce a champagne, but this time he would experiment it with Moscato grapes. He would experiment with Moscato grapes. So it was a different wine compared to the French counterpart, because Moscato has is a different grape compared to those that go into Champagne, and therefore the profile was very different. But the history of Asti Spumante is also important because in 1895, Martinotti, who was the then manager of the experimental viticulture school of Asti, experimented successfully a new methodology to produce spumantes with a secondary fermentation taking place not in the bottle but in a pressurized tank, in a sealed tank. And that was the inception of the spumante industry in Italy. And although the methodology was not patented by Martinotti but by a Frenchman by the name of Charma, this technology has now expanded to all markets and many sparkling wines. I would like now to refer to the companies and the wineries that are represented today. The first wine we have is a dry Asti. The winery is Matteo Soria. The wine is called Brick Prima Bella Brut. So it's the most recent style. It's been admitted by the rule book only from October 2020 on. So the driest version being Brut, Extra Brut, and Pas d'Oseille. So in this case, it's not Matteo who's going to speak to us, but Lucia. I am Lucia. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to present the Matteo Soria winery. We are based in Castiglione Tinella, in the area that our general manager has so well described. It's a family-run business, and we're specialized in the cultivation and vinification of Moscato d'Asti in every style. So we produce the Asti DOCG, then Asti Brut in this new dry version as a sparkling wine, and then the Moscato d'Asti as we know it. We are in the municipality of Castiglione Tinella, one of the best known for the cultivation and production of these grapes, and Matteo immediately made a decision to immediately try to make a Brut from Moscato grapes as soon as it became possible. He had already tried to make an extra dry, and successfully so. Now, what can we say? On the nose, it is a typical Moscato with the typical descriptors that we've heard about. But then on the palate, it is pretty surprising because there's a dry wine with fine bubbles that are very elegant and very versatile. So I think this could be defined as a wine that goes well on aperitifs as well as with first courses like pasta courses or also fish or chicken or rabbit. It is a product that Matteo really cherishes, and especially this dry version he thinks is very interesting. It has 12% alcohol and 11 grams per liter of sugar. It's not a very rich wine in terms of alcohol, but it does have some body, and it lingers on the palate also because of that. And it's a good product that can be presented with the entire meal. The name is Bricca Primabella because the grapes are grown on the Bricca. Brick in Piedmontese means the hilltop, and it is right there that the Matteo Soria company has a vineyard facing south where we grow the grapes that we then use for our Asti Brut. What else could I add? Our winery is specialized in the vinification of Moscato d'Asti, so we are Moscato specialists. So we have a lot of technology and technological innovation at our winery, and we process Moscato grapes using the cold chain principle. So as soon as they are picked, the grapes are turned into must. The temperature is brought to levels that are much, much lower than room temperature. And then that stops the fermentation in order to preserve all the aromas that are typical of Moscato d'Asti. So the primary aromas, the aromas of the grapes, so that they can transition easily from the grapes to the wine. I think you all have recognized these aromas on the nose from this glass of Asti Brut. Now, despite the fact that this is a Brut, you get a lot of aromatics on the nose. And so talking about Asti Secco, or anyway, Asti that is not sweet, dry, or extra dry even.
L'aromaticità di un'uva così che si distingue in maniera così forte dalle altre uva
aromatic character of this wine makes for a product that is definitely very interesting. Okay, I will now leave the floor to Enrico Gobino for wine number 2, The winery is Cuvage. Enrico, can you hear us?
Ti vediamo?
You can see.
Giacomo.
Thank you,
Buon
Giacomo.
pomeriggio a tutti.
Good afternoon to you all.
Grazie anche della tua ottima presentazione.
Thank you for your excellent introduction. I'm here to present our Asti.
Millesimato.
It's a vintage wine, and specifically you should have received the vintage, the 2017 vintage. We're talking obviously of a very interesting area. It has 7% alcohol and
100 grammi litro.
The residual sugar is 100 grams per liter. What is special about the selection that we use to make this Asti lies in the specific area where the grapes come from, with vineyards at elevations between 250 and 400 meters above sea level. So these are grapes that give us a lot of freshness. Maybe I will not go into the details of the composition, but be aware that it's a patchwork of different municipalities so that we get a snapshot of the various microclimates involved. We're talking in any case of vineyards that are at their very best. And the vineyards were planted with 4,000, 4,500 vines per hectare and an average vine age of 23 years. This Asti, again, is a 2017 vintage, and together with the 2014 vintage, it was in the top 10 of the best Moscatos in the world. This time it ranked fourth, and it was the only Moscato with this in this traditional style. We have time spent on the lees. Between 3 and 18 months, depending on the vintage. And this particular expression favors the complexity of the aromatic profile of Moscato. And so you already can see there's a very delicate effervescence, a very fine bead. While on the nose, there are a few notes that normally tend to appear later in the life of the wine. A few balsamic notes that are very interesting, I think, and that Moscato will bring out when aged, when cellared. Of course, this is a metodo classico, so it all develops in the bottle, then we disgorge it, and the product is then allowed to rest for another 5 to 6 months before it is released. Yes, just to finish off, to the palate, you rediscover the aromatic complexity with an acidic
una grande complessità, è
with an acidic, he calls it vein.
Che ci piace,
this is a metodo classico, and
nel pensare questo prodotto anche come Asti, con la sua capacità
and we like it because it's an Asti that has an ability to evolve over time with aging. So it's a good representation of that. Okay, can you tell us more about the fact that this is a metodo classico? A metodo classico, so a secondary fermentation in the bottle, is not often associated with Moscato. And so people may not be aware of the pairings that it lends itself to. So we have
levigate,
these
fanno sì
very
che
smooth
comunque anche l'aspetto dolce
bubbles
dolcezza venga comunque
that
contenuto e la possibilità che il
limit
momento
the
sia
sweet
vastissima.
sensation. And so that allows us to pair it with infinite
l'idea nasce
foods and
chiaramente
tastes.
dal
Now, our idea was that we should
con le grandi, non soltanto bollicine, ma anche le grandi varietà
not just stand
aromatiche in giro.
to the great bubblies of the world, but also the great aromatics of the world. I see Chicago's online, Toronto's online, Miami's online. I think we've all tasted Rieslings at some point in our lives and other aromatic wines that were several years old. So when you have great quality grapes,
Anche nell'Asti
even
ha
Moscato and
questa
even as an Asti has the
potenzialità
same
di
potential
far esperienziare altre tipologie di quadri
to
percettivi,
be
chiamiamoli
made
così,
into
grazie
different
all'evoluzione.
styles with
Sicuramente la
different
gestione
perceptions that can be enhanced by aging. Certainly, the production of a metodo classico and especially the management of the affinage in the bottle, of the aging, the cellaring in the bottle, requires extra precautions because this is a wine that still has a high sugar content. We're still in the category of Asti Spumante Dolce because it contains 100 grams of sugar per liter, but this silkiness and this herbaceous note takes over with the autolysis of the yeasts, and this capacity too just bring out this very interesting creaminess will encourage you to be more audacious in pairing it. Lucia was talking about different foods. It could be sushi or even exotic foods.
Giacomo hai tirato fuori un abbinamento
Now,
recentemente.
Giacomo, you just developed a pairing with the chefs with salted anchovies.
Delle sollecitazioni
So
olfattive, gustative
these wines bring out olfactory sensations, gustatory sensations that only Asti can offer. So it's a very extraordinary bubbly. Our interpretation makes us hope that we can also think that Asti will be included soon on the wine lists of prominent restaurants so that they can also play around with pairings and offer something absolutely unheard of compared to the traditional pairings of Moscato-based wines. When you blind taste these wines, the primary notes that evolve and leave room and will tend towards the balsamic flavors are generally attracting a lot of interest. And as you said, the natural neurological pairing between the primary flavors and aromas and the amplification of the sweet sensation stops to be. So although we keep the same level of residual sugar, actually the impact of the sweetness is not one of the main things that you remark with this wine. Thank you very much, Enrico. Very, very interesting what you said. I would like to move on to wine number 3. The company is not represented today. It is the Fratelli Martini, and Canti is the range. In this case, it is a sweet Asti Spumante, Metodo Martinotti, not a Metodo Classico, as we've tasted just a couple of seconds ago. So, and it's a more traditional vinification of Asti, so a more traditional Asti Spumante style.
Il vino risponde ai descrittori
In
aromatici.
this case, again, the wine corresponds to the aromatic descriptors that we mentioned
Palato c'è
previously.
riferimento più agrumato rispetto
Now, in this case, to my palate, I think this veers more towards citrus fruit than the previous wines, but it is a wine that definitely describes what an Asti Spumante is.
numero 4.
Wine number 4.
Locali in Milano, ovviamente. Se non mi sbaglio, il vino non dovrebbe.
For the Milanese people, I think the wine should be perhaps in Toronto, not in Chicago and in Milan, so apologies to those in Chicago. Wine number 4 is Martini and Rossi, one of the most time-honored wineries in the production of Asti Spumante. This is the premium product from Martini and Rossi when it comes to Asti Spumante.
Numero 4, perdonatemi, mi correggono dalla regia
It's number 4, wine number 4.
della giornata. Non ci sono, diciamo, responsabili aziendali
I don't think there's anyone representing Martini and Rossi to describe the company. And since we have a short time and the wines are good and numerous, I would go to wine number 5. It is Caudrina. And so from now on, I will be talking of Moscato d'Asti, that is the semi-sparkling style.
Facci pure una.
Okay, here's Marco.
Marco Dogliotti dell'azienda
Marco Dogliotti of the Caudrina estate. Spend a couple of words and tell us more about the estate and the wine. Okay. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. I am Marco Dogliotti. I'm the third son of the third generation of the Caudrina estate. The company was founded in 1940 with my grandfather, who would make just part of his grape harvest into Moscato to sell on his own. In 1970, my father, who had just turned 18, started making the first experiments vinifying Moscato on his own entirely. Those were really the very first vinifications because there were probably 2, maybe 3 farms making their own Moscato, and that was because the product was hard to make, and it was a product that was left at the hands of the industrial scale producers in general back then. And so we produced our flagship wine back then, called La Caudrina. La Caudrina is a blend of different vineyards surrounding the farmhouse. We're based in Castiglione Tinella. We have some 25 hectares, of which 20 are planted with Moscato. Part of this Moscato harvest is used to make our Asti Spumante, while another proportion is used to make a single vineyard called La Galesa. It's a cru, still also a Moscato, but it's not for tasting today. Now, our Moscato is, of course, produced at the same time as our Asti Spumante, but it has less alcohol content than Asti. Around 4.5 to 5.5 or 6 being the maximum for the designation. Now, people are not often aware of this. Both Moscato and Asti Spumante are natural products. So no sugar is ever added, nor is CO2 added at any point. So whatever is in the glass is natural.
Puoi descriverci semplicemente il vino?
Can you describe your wine?
Parlo para me.
Caudrina, as I said, is a blend of several vineyards, Moscato from several vineyards. It has approximately 130 grams per liter in terms of residual sugar. It's got a fresh aromatics, a nice acidity, a good balance between the sweetness and the acidity, which is very important for sweet wines in general, with a lot of citrus fruit on the nose that is very reminiscent of tropical fruit like pineapple.
Come descrizione direi che
I think that's all. I think it's a very nice description. Thank you very much, Marco.
della tua testimonianza di azienda storica legata ovviamente.
Okay, Marco is part of a time-honored winery in the world of Moscato d'Asti. Wine number 6 will be presented by Andrea Costa of the Marengo Winery.
People in Chicago.
So he's saying good morning to the people in Chicago and Miami. It's a
Marengo Scarpona. So Marengo starts to make Moscato in 19... Scusate, buon pomeriggio a tutti e buongiorno agli amici a
So good afternoon to you all, and
Moscato Marengo.
welcome to our friends in Chicago and Miami. Moscato Marengo started in 1925 when Michela Marengo started to produce Moscato, and then Bracchetto and Barbera in the area of Strevi. Strevi needs to be referred to in the area of Moscato because it's one of the subzones of Moscato d'Asti that is well represented in our production rulebook. It is a hilly area, and the Moscato that you're tasting is characterized by the fact that we lie south, to the south of the area of Moscato. We have grapes that ripen early with high sugar contents. We're close to the Apennines, and we're not far from the sea. In terms of bird's flight, it's just 30 kilometers from the sea. That's very important for the ripening of the grapes. And then last but not least, our soil is characterized by marl and limestone, which guarantees the acidity and freshness, which is key in Moscato d'Asti to make it easy to drink and enjoyable. This is Crapona that you're tasting. The first vintage was 1924 when we decided to vinify this.
Buongiorno a tutti, anzi,
When we decided to vinify it 100% to make a single vineyard. So he's saying good morning to Miami. Miami, are you there?
Sono svegli.
hope you
dai.
like the wine.
Okay.
E allora,
He's saying, I hope you like the wines. Now, Scrapona.
della parcella il nome della
Scrapona is the name of the vineyard, of the plot. Is this Chicago? What? Toronto. It's Toronto.
Toronto.
Hi, Toronto. Good morning.
Buona colazione.
Teniamo dolci, buona colazione, esatto.
Okay, have a nice breakfast.
Per la colazione,
So it's a perfect wine for breakfast. What do you think?
coi cornetti, il brunch, esatto. Ma non
Okay,
solo col
that's a
cornetto,
wine.
provare anche con le uova.
Not just with a croissant, but also with eggs and pancakes. It's very, very versatile. So thanks to this freshness, I travel a lot to different markets with Moscato alone. It's our leading wine, so I've seen it in extraordinary pairings. In Italy, we are accustomed to tasting it with desserts, and it's ideal use.
Qualsiasi vino, ma
Now, people are associating desserts with any type of white wine or even other wines. But dry wines generally don't go well on desserts because you get a very iron-like sensation on the palate. And
secondo me noi italiani dovremmo tornare.
so we Italians, we should go back to the tradition and reappropriate our sweet wines with our sweets with our desserts. When they say that Moscato is the wine of panettone, of the Christmas cake, you can't. I tend to agree because you can't have panettone without Moscato. Okay, but I have tried it with a tempura of sage, with a sage tempura, and was just wonderful, thanks to the freshness counterbalancing the sweetness. Scrapona is a vineyard in Strevi, this wonderful subzone for Moscato. And since 1984, we've made this single vineyard because it has an aromatic profile of its own. It has the typical characteristics of Moscato d'Asti, as Giacomo described before, with a prevalence of tropical nuances. To the palate, it has a lush profile. It's a very full, but it leaves room for freshness and acidity. So it's a Moscato that truly is a wine that goes with dishes that are not exclusively sweet. 5% alcohol, 120, 130 grams per liter of residual sugar. As Marco said, you cannot add any sugar because of the rule book, so it wouldn't be legal to add any, and therefore it's all natural sugar contained in the grapes. Now, our Scrapona vineyard is a very interesting vineyard, and we've gone through mass selection of our clones when we replanted the vineyard in 1991, so it is a selection of vines that refer to the original plantings in the area. Okay, thank you very much, and see you. Okay, now Giulio is here to tell us about wine number 7. Giulio Bosca is going to tell us more about the winery and the product we are tasting now. Good afternoon and good morning. I'm Giulio Bosca. I'm here to present our Lucciole. It's an organic wine. It's a Moscato d'Asti from Tosti 1820. We went 10 years ago from conventional to organic farming, and that brought back the fireflies, in Italian Lucciole, so hence the name of the wine. The fireflies are back. So I'm part of the 8th generation of the Bosca family, Bosca Tosti 1820. So the fireflies are back to the farm and estate that I grew up in, because the fireflies only go where there's no pollution. So when we went organic, they came back. So we cultivate it according to the organic principles, but also we have our vineyards with a southern exposure, and a high gradient, so we get a lot of sunlight. These areas are known as Suri. On the other hand, these vineyards are difficult to cultivate, and also the yields tend to be lower than elsewhere, so 70 quintals or 7 tons per hectare. Tosti is a historical company that is closely associated to the growers that provide their grapes to us. In this case, we have the Vigneto delle Lucciole, which is a cru. I would like to tell you more about the shape of the bottle. It's something that sort of sets us apart. I don't know if the people in Toronto and Chicago can see this. There's a navel. There's a navel on the bottle. Well, the story of this navel goes back a long time. In our case, 20 years. The most important products historically and humanly are embedded in a feminine shape. So the bottle is shaped like a woman. And just like in the ancient times, the best products are preserved in pots and vases with a feminine shape. And so this is being our most precious wine. We decided to shape our bottle in the shape of a woman's body with a navel, and all our bottles are characterized by this navel. Now, the second wine that was tasted today was a vintage wine. Now, Moscato is generally thought of as a wine that needs to be drunk when young. In this case, the wine is 2016, if I'm not mistaken, but it's a wine that can be aged and can be consumed a few years later. So this is because of the fact that the grapes are rich in themselves. We don't do much about it. It's a wine with a special acidity and lots of aromatics, and it can be consumed after 3-4 years of aging, like in this case. Now, certainly we described the pairing with sweets and desserts, but I like a lot these pairings by contrast. And we're not even inventing anything new, because our farmers would drink a Moscato in the middle of the afternoon and would have it with cheese and cured meats, the Rocchiola di Roccaverano and our Piedmontese salami. So I encourage everyone here and in America to taste it with savory foods that are in contrast, foods that are lush, that are fat, and that are rich, and not the typical dessert. Well, desserts are good with Moscato, excellent with Moscato, but then savory foods go well with it too. Now, this idea of the old vintages and wines that are 8 to 10 years old is something surprising about Moscato d'Asti that has not been explored even fully even by the Consorzio dell'Asti, and so this could convey a different image of Moscato d'Asti moving forward, and it would be surprising if we think of it in a fine dining setting. I mean, that opens up to very interesting prospects. Moscato d'Asti in its evolution and with the years can develop into a very interesting wine. I don't want to compare it to French wines like Sauternes, but it has, very specific aromas such as sultanas and candied fruit. And maybe that's not known to many people, even Moscato lovers, who are accustomed to drinking it when young. Okay, wine number 8. This wine is produced by Bava, and it's produced by the Bava family. It's called Bastuba, and we have Roberto with us to talk about it.
Roberto, ci senti?
Roberto, can you hear us? Yes, we can hear you now.
Sono collegato da Londra. Allora, grazie, ciao a tutti.
So, good afternoon from London. Bava is a family winery. This year we're celebrating 110 harvests, and so it will be a very festive year. And because we also produce Moscato, the party will continue indefinitely. We started producing Moscato d'Asti in the 1950s, and what's interesting today is that this Bastuba, which is a musical Moscato, because that reflects our inspiration, was first made in 1982, and it was one of the first Moscatos that were meant to change the style of Moscato, to make a Moscato that would be richer and also perhaps a bit more expensive on the market. Consequently, Bastuba was the first Moscato to be sold in a Bordeaux bottle, and actually that was our attempt to break away from the past. What you were saying, Giacomo, was very interesting. Moscato like this, if you taste it, has this great fragrance, and you can even detect a mango, some mango in it, and as if it had been added on purpose. But that's what we're looking for, a generous, very fragrant wine. But at the same time, we imagine that it can age it. Back in 1982, we already tested it for the long run. This is one of those Moscatos that have a residual sugar level of 120 to 130 grams per liter. And sugar is a natural preservative. So another interesting challenge is that we want that Moscato is associated with an entire meal. And the alcohol being low, 4.5% by volume, this is a Moscato that is comparable to like food. It is nutritious and it comes very close to the fruit. We have a lot of tropical fruit in this Moscato and makes it different from the traditional wine. And it goes well on every food. You could just serve it with bananas, lychees, and that makes it a wine that has some extra versatility. And we have lots of different wines that we make. We've produced for over 1 century the Malvasia of Castelnuovo Don Bosco, and which is also sweet. So what do you do with a wine like this? Well, as someone mentioned before, we suggested that you pair it by contrast. When I have a ripened Gorgonzola blue cheese, I think that a Moscato would work well with it. I'm naturally led into uncorking a bottle of Moscato. So it's not a good pairing for sweets, but also with contrasting dishes. Wines like Moscato can also, because of its low alcohol content, be turned into sorbets. And so it has very specific characteristics that should be exploited. The acidity helps in that respect because a wine with so much residual sugar would be hard to drink otherwise, but the freshness of the acidity counterbalances the lushness of the wine very well. So it's a wonderful wine, a wine that can also be aged. You don't have to age it, but it can be done. I've kept my Moscatos for 7, 8, 10 years. The typical Moscatos, even without any special processing like secondary fermentation, bottle fermentation, metodo classico, and it works well. And it lends itself to new ways of consuming wine, and it needs to be respected as a great wine, the great wine it is. We produce 1 million bottles. We have started distributing it to the United States after a few years when we hadn't. And the name is basso tuba. It's a musical instrument, something that has a low sound, that is also joyful, entertaining, and motherly at the same time. So let's not forget this aspect of Moscato. This is why we were inspired to call it basso tuba. Thank you very much for your interpretation of the wine. If you can resist it, don't drink it. But if you drink it right away, we're happy all the same. So thank you very much, Roberto from London. Wine number 9 is from Marchesi di Barolo. We have Valentina Bona that would like to take the floor now. I'm Valentina Bona. Good morning. We are the owners of the Marchesi di Barolo, and as the name suggests, we are known for our Barolo. We are in the center of the village of Barolo, and for the past 30 years, our family has made Asti Spumante first, and then Moscato d'Asti. And then in the 1980s, we started with Moscato d'Asti. So first Asti, and then from the 80s, Moscato d'Asti. It's called Zagara. Zagara means orange blossom, and that's because of the aromas it is known for. And it is very well balanced in the glass. The area that the grapes come from is why our Moscato is like that. The vineyard it comes from is the Crevacuore vineyard in the municipality of Calosso. It's one of the 73 historical soris, that is the sunny slopes. And Crevacuore is known for its big slopes, the gradient being 50%. So it's very hard to grow the grapes, to cultivate the vines there, as Giulio told us. And also for the vines, it's hard because they have to dig deeper into the ground to get their energy and the substances, the nutrients that then are transferred to the glass. And then the soil is very lean, and therefore it supports the freshness in the glass. A lot of citrus fruit is also enriching the pairings. We could associate it with exotic spices, and the sour sweet dishes of Southeast Asia could go very well with the Moscato d'Asti and Asti Spumante. I personally spent some time in China, and I think that many of the dishes I tasted there would have been a lot more interesting if paired with our Moscatos and Asti Spumante, because thanks to the acidity of these wines, the pairing would be more ideal than those that were suggested when I was there. And also it's good to prepare the palate for a new dish. Very often, demi-sec and very sweet spumantes or sparkling wines are served with Thai cuisine in general, to bring back the spiciness of the dish to a better balance. Certainly, the association of our products with traditional cuisine and ethnic cuisine is something that we should develop in order to propose something new in terms of pairings, innovative pairings. I think today we've given an opportunity not just to us Italians, but also those who follow us from abroad to understand that this is an opportunity, a great opportunity. And possibly abroad they are unbiased, and so they are readier to accept these suggestions. And they're already doing so. Okay, thank you very much. Now, the floor goes to the representatives of wine number 10, the Vignaioli di Santo Stefano Belbo, and we have Giampiero Scavino to tell us about his wine. After an angel's voice telling about Moscato, here's the wild one. He says. Now, Vignaioli di Santo Stefano is a partnership of two families, my brother Andrea and myself. We take care of the production, while the Cerettos are in charge of the promotion and distribution of our Moscato. The production area, as you can see, is across 3 municipalities, Santo Stefano, Belbo, Canelli, Calosso, all in the same area of the Moscato designation. And ours is one of the first wineries that started producing Moscato of a certain kind in an effort to diversify the production of the area. We have 40 hectares of vineyards, and we are certified organic, which causes which involves a reduction in terms of yields per hectare, but the quality of the product, also from a health perspective, is much, much better. In terms of the characteristics, I will not tell you what all my colleagues have been telling you again and again. I think we all have the ambition to develop quality products that have different characteristics, because we're talking about this precisely depending on the area of production. We are not in an area of great red wines where the various crus are exalted in different ways. But Moscato too has its specificities, and each company should have and has its own characteristics. In our case, we have 3 different areas because it's 3 municipalities, but it's the best known for the quality of their grapes. Thank you. Thank you, Giampiero, for what you added to the general discussion. Time for wine number 11. Of course, this is not a ranking, it's just the sequence of the flight, and it's made by Vincchio e Vaglio, Cantina Vincchio e Vaglio, and we have Tessa Donaggio to tell us about it. Good afternoon and good morning to the people in Milan, Miami, Toronto, and Chicago. I am Tessa Donaggio, and I'm the export manager of this winery, and I represent a cooperative that is located in a small village south of Asti called Vincchio, and nearby there is Vaglio Serra, another village. The 2 villages established this winery in 1959 based on the intuition of 19 founding members. We represent 192 families for 470 hectares in total, and a big proportion of our production is Barbera. But just like we exploited the versatility of Barbera, we exploited the same skills to create our Moscato. My colleagues made such a rich presentation that I can only add that Moscato can be very, very versatile. And it is a varietal that is very ancient, absolutely ancient, that has been cultivated for millennia in the entire Mediterranean basin and in Italy and in other countries, so that too should be further investigated. So there's still a lot to discover about it. We have a Moscato d'Asti DOCG to integrate our range of wines, a wine that could not be left out given the area that we're in. We have hills of between 250 to 350 meters above sea level, very steep, and most of the cultivation happens manually. This year was a particularly interesting vintage from different points of view. It didn't rain at all for months, but the Moscato benefited from a lot of sunlight and really ripened in a very balanced way, and also homogeneously across our territory, with a lot of sugars to be used in it. Today we're tasting 2020. Our vinification is very traditional. We use pressure tanks at 0 degrees C. We keep the musts there until we stop the fermentation when we reach a 5.5% alcohol by volume. And our residual sugar is left in the wine, and it's natural sugar again. and it's a wine that brings to the palate a lot of fruit, peaches, and citrus fruit too. What supports it is this sweetness, and the sweetness comes from the soil. The soils in Vinchio are sandy, essentially, with a few calcareous areas, calcareous spots, which helps the freshness in this wine. It's a very enjoyable, very versatile wine. I remember a dinner in Chongqing in China with a hot pot and Moscato d'Asti with it, and it worked wonderfully. So it can range from a variety, from traditional cuisine to a variety of cuisines around the world. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for what you said about Moscato being versatile. Wine number 12. We have the Alice Bel Colle wine rain. We should have Daniele Bianco online with us. Daniele, can you hear us? Yes. Good evening, Daniele. I am here to represent the Cantina Alice Bel Colle. It's a small cooperative winery in the province of Alessandria, but close to the province of Asti.
Quindi ci troviamo nella parte
So we are in the southern part of the area. We are tasting the Moscato d'Asti Paillet, a subzone of Stravi. It's a wine that is part of the 3 subzones of the Moscato d'Asti, together with Canelli and Santa Vittoria. It is a wine that can be produced in 9 municipalities that surround the town of Acquiterme. This wine has a high residual sugar content, around 95 grams per liter. The sweetness comes from the fact that 10% of the grapes are harvested early in October. So probably he said 195, but I'm not sure because the signal just went away. I'll check later. So they partially, because they're harvested late, they will start to dry and concentrate on the vines. This is counterbalanced by a very interesting acidity that imparts freshness to this wine, making it very enjoyable. The name Paillet identifies a small area in the territory of our municipality. It's a very cool valley that faces east, and it's an area that will not receive the warmest sun rays during the day, so it's not exposed to sunlight in the hottest hours of the day, and that preserves the freshness of our Moscato. So ours is an area where the aromas often tend to be floral. One of the main descriptors of Moscato d'Asti is sage, but in this wine it is particularly prominent. Then we have wisteria, nuances, acacia blossom. So very reminiscent of floral descriptors, perhaps to the detriment of the fruity descriptors that are typical of the areas of the colleagues who just spoke before me. We have a small production, around 6,000 bottles. It's a very recent wine because we only have 3 vintages of it, 2018, 19 and 20. It was also vinified with the aim of making it age-worthy. So it's designed to be long-lived. We are improving our vinification techniques in the perspective of giving it longevity. Moscato is wonderful when younger, but also after a few years, I think, has a reason to be, and a very good reason to be, I have to say. Pairings. Well, the typical pairings there. As Tessa said, I would like to highlight the fact that it would work well with a very nice hot pot or a spicy food, because we feel it works very well and it is often underestimated, but I think that it has a lot of interest. Thank you. Thank you very much, Daniele.
Grazie dell'intervento.
Thank you.
Grazie anche a te. Prego Andrea, ultimo.
And now Andrea, the last but not least wine.
Alpiste, prego.
Allora, buonasera, buongiorno a tutti.
Good evening.
Io sono Andrea.
I am Andrea and I represent the Terra Bianca winery. We are rather young winery. We were founded 20 years ago, but the farm pre-existed and was there since the late 19th century. Today I have I'm here with my 2020 Moscato. It is sustainable because it limits the use of chemistry to a minimum, and also the carbon footprint is taken care of. We work in a way that will reduce it as much as possible. We use machines to the extent possible, because we're in Mango, where the hills are very steep. The elevation is 500 to 550 meters above sea level. The vineyards are 30 years old, and they express the very best in terms of the complexity of the wine. So we are among the highest elevations in the designation area, and we have limestone, a lot of limestone that brings out the floral notes and the balsamic notes, which will emerge as it emerges immediately, but then it will emerge more and more as the wine ages. We have wines in our cellar that we enjoy tasting that are 10 years old, and you discover as you taste them how Moscato can develop, and it has a lot of potential. It will be a different wine from what we have in the class now, but the potential is really extraordinary. Okay, pairings, I think we've explored a lot, and I don't want to repeat what others have suggested, but I think the main pairings will still apply. It's very interesting on savory foods, and it's excellent on desserts.
Il tema dei sori è un tema che comunque
Now, the idea,
l'azienda allo stesso modo, comunque i vigneti sono
stories are very important in general. Are they important for your winery too, for your estate too? Yes, indeed. Mango is known for having very steep hillsides. The Vignotto, which is the vineyard that we get our Moscato from, our Moscato grapes from, has an average gradient of 30% with peaks at 40-45%. So it's very steep, and it's all tended by hand, other than the management of the grass and the area under the rows, because we cannot go there with machinery. Now, the stories are very interesting.
Del cru, o comunque di riuscire a individuare una specifica situazione.
Marketing point to use, because if the producers want to do so, it's a very interesting point that can be used to differentiate this wine from others. And the Soris, so the steep vineyards that face south, are also one of the reasons why we got the UNESCO listing and then the UNESCO inclusion, which was not just based on the beauty of the landscapes, but also to the human work that goes into preserving the landscape intact for the future generations. Of course, there's a lot of work on the part of many wineries and farmers and growers behind this UNESCO listing that has made us known the world over. Now, I don't know if there are any questions from either this room or the other rooms, the other locations. Yes. Yes, there is a question from Toronto. Toronto is asking, the second wine, MGM, the cuvage wine, does it take 1 or 2 fermentations? And the acronym DOCG, is that associated to a traditional fermentation methodology? Enrico, are you still there? Would you like to provide some details about the production method? For the metodo classico, Enrico? Yes, I can hear you. Okay, just give us the gist. Well, there is a double fermentation because the fermentation is taking place at 2 separate stages of the production process. That's why it also takes so long. But the most important part is the time that the wine spends on the lees during the bottle fermentation. The secondary fermentation, there's the first fermentation that takes place, the alcoholic fermentation, and then you have a secondary fermentation in the bottle that imparts a lot of the aromas. And the DOCG is the highest designation in terms of quality, and it can apply to any wine. It can be a sparkling wine, red, white, still, semi-sparkling, fizzy, but that is simply a description of the quality of the wine, so also depending on the historic relevance of the wine, and not just historical, but also it reflects the interest that this wine can have for the markets. So a DOCG wine is a historical wine that represents the best of Italian wine production. Unless there are other questions, I would like to thank you all, as well as the companies who have brought their exemplary wines that were very pleasant, exciting, entertaining, that can be sipped at any time of the day. Thank you very much. Thank you.